sense of business within the U.S.-India corridor and beyond. I'm your host, Angela Chitkara. Today, we are joined by Dr. Cheryl Sterling, an associate professor of English and African Studies at Penn State University. She served as director of African Studies at PSU and Black Studies at the City College of New York. Her work is on race, coloniality, performance, and aesthetics. She is currently the vice president of the Association for the Study of Worldwide African Diaspora, or ASWAD. She is a Fulbright scholar and recipient of numerous grants. Dr. Sterling is currently working on a book project creating aesthetic theories based on Yoruba Orisha paradigms. Welcome, my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Cheryl Sterling.
Well, thank you so much, Angela, for having me on your podcast. I'm truly honored by this.
Well, thank you. And I'm lucky to have you with us. I'll be introducing Ramesh Vishwanath Kapoor, co-chair of the Harris Victory Fund National Committee and president of the U.S.-India Security Council. But before we begin, I thought we'd spend some time chatting with Dr. Sterling about her research and scholarly work in the areas of race, ethnicity, and identity. So Dr. Sterling, let's start off by first defining what race, ethnicity, and identity are. What are the differences, and how do we define race, ethnicity, and identity in the United States from a historical context?
Well, I would say that race and ethnicity, to begin with, are maybe opposite ends of the spectrum, because one is about belonging and one is about not belonging. Race was really an idea that was created in the 1500s in the Enlightenment discourse. And it was about how human beings are divided into distinct groups. It was created, by more Northern Europeans exploring their world kind of through pseudo-scientific discourse. And basically, they created kind of these hierarchies in which they placed themselves at the apex. And they basically they said that there were certain inherited physical characteristics that defined race, and what was more pernicious, more behavioral characteristics that defined race. They created for themselves, as I said, a hierarchy where they were the human beings and everybody else fell into subcategories. They were either subhuman or not human. So this is how that begins that whole racial dynamics. Now, in terms of ethnicity and what becomes identity, later on we can talk about that. Ethnicity is really about our quest for belonging. It's a quest for this common ground that we have. And it begins basically with human beings trying to come together. So it becomes something in a belief in what we all share. So maybe some attribute that we all share, maybe something that pulls us together. But it comes, ethnicity comes through the belief that we share culture, maybe we share language, we share religion, we share some sort of ethos that pulls us together. Maybe we share we have a common ancestry. So ethnicity now has started to become something that's attached to nationality, because the nation state has kind of taken the place of maybe a smaller group. Now, identity is more something that we individually choose. And we can choose to belong to these categories, these changing categories of race, or we changing categories of ethnicity. So how we choose becomes how we identify in the world. And we then we choose necessarily how we position ourselves in the world based on different types of categorizations, and how we manifest these categorizations and how we position ourselves based on these categorizations.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Sterling. So U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's race, ethnicity, and identity are being questioned. Some say she is flip-flopping and referring to in identifying as an African American and other times through her Indian ancestry. VP Harris was born in 1964, the same year that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed, a landmark civil rights and labor law in the United States that outlaws discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, and national origin. According to a 2015 Pew Research survey, people who identify as being multiracial cannot be easily categorized as America becomes more racially diverse, and those social taboos of interracial marriage are fading. An example, multiracial adults with a Black background, according to Pew Research, 69% said most people would view them as Black or African American with experiences and attitudes that are more closely aligned with the Black community. The survey also revealed that race is fluid throughout one's life and it can be situational. So what does it mean to be multiracial in the United States?
Well, we have to understand race doesn't really exist. Okay, just like ethnicity doesn't exist. Identity is what's chosen. We choose to take on these categories. Okay, so Kamala Harris is both Black and she is both South Asian. There's no choice in this matter for her. She's both. And so for her to manifest both of these identities is completely natural. And we have to look at her background. She grew up with a mother who became single after, she was divorced from her father. From what I understand about Kamala's background, they divorced when she was about 7 years old. And her mother came from an activist background. She came to the United States in 1959. Now, as a South Asian woman, she came here to this country before the civil rights movement at the beginning of the civil rights movement. And she was alone. She came as a student, and she came before there was this great immigration of other South Asians. Who were her companions? She became an activist within the civil rights movement. She fell in love with someone who also came from another country. They found certain commonalities. They were both, expats from British colonialized countries. They must have found some commonality with their backgrounds, because quite frankly, during that period, very, very little immigration was allowed from countries that were not Northern European. There was a common understanding that happened in immigration circles, that they would only allow certain countries from Northern Europe, not even Southern Europe, to come in freely. And they only allowed maybe 100 people from different countries in the world, from countries of color, to come in. And so for them to come in, that you realize that they were of the elite. Okay, they were educationally elite, and they were also elite in their background. So they came together, and they found some commonality. They were both in these struggles together. And so coming from this background, and then of course her mother being divorced, who were her community? And in California, her community was African Americans. And so Kamala grew up with this mother with this cultural background, but she also grew up in the midst of the struggle for further equality. She spoke, during the last cycle of elections, of being part of the group of children that were being bused to school. So she definitely grew up in the midst of the changing demographic of the African American experience in the United States. And so she, with her mother, kind of inculcating this kind of sense of justice, this sense of needing to change the existence of people around her, of trying to be the very best person she's going to be, and also her father inculcating the same. what else is she going to be? She's going to be both, and she's going to be this kind of strong force that is going to move towards change.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sterling. I'd like to now bring in Mr. Ramesh Vishwanath Kapoor, co-chair of the Harris Victory Fund National Committee and president of the U.S.-India Security Council. He joins us from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. Welcome, Ramesh.
Thank you. Thank you for interviewing me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining us, sir. Ramesh, we were just referencing how U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's race and identity are being questioned. Vice President Harris was born in 1964, the same year that the Civil Rights Act of 1964 passed. How is Vice President Harris's race and identity in question?
Well, it's the opposition. Okay, opposition. Trump especially questions everything. He even questioned Obama, if Obama was born in the United States. So that's the same play that the movie, like Obama says, same movie that we have heard before.
One of the things that we also have to understand too, that year that Kamala was born with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was the game-changing year in this country. And the Civil Rights Act, people always think that the Civil Rights Act was only for Black people, that it's supposed to end discrimination and create affirmative action, laws and rules. The Civil Rights Act was an act that ended discrimination. It ended discrimination supposed to end discrimination in the workplace, end discrimination in public facilities, but it also ended discrimination in federal agencies. And what it did was to allow for the demographic shift in this nation. I think we were talking before, Angela, about how, Kamala's mother, and father were kind of anomalies in terms of immigration. After the Civil Rights Act of 1965 came the Immigration Act. And because of the Civil Rights Act, immigration had to change because it came out of a federally funded agency. And this act opened immigration to groups that were never allowed to enter the United States before in an unfettered manner. So people from Southern Europe, from the Caribbean, from Asia, from Africa, from Latin America were allowed to come in to the United States in much larger numbers. And we started to see the beginnings of the demographic shift in this country. So the Civil Rights Act then changed everything and was a game changer for everybody. And she was born at the cusp of that. So she was born at the cusp of change. Right. And she's leading forward change.
Thank you.
So let me add another thing, Cheryl. I believe the Black community has a lot of blood and sweat for other folks to get the civil rights. The women got a lot of civil rights. People don't talk about it, but it's because of those civil rights is that women got a lot of equal opportunities that they never had. All right. And of course, the point that you made it about immigration, but it's like labor, I mean, a lot of folks do not realize that it's, 8-day week and certain things that labor had fought in our society helped in getting the regulations for the rest of the population. All right. And a lot of people, I haven't said people talk about what the Black community was able to do for the women in this country. Okay, it's the Black community who is bearing the burden in 64, and is still bearing the burden to become the melting pot, which was written years back, but it is starting to become more of a melting pot. If you look at it, that's when it has come to reality. Before, earlier was just a conversation thing. America is a melting pot. But now it has come to reality where there is interracial marriages. And as I said, Kamala Devi Harris, I call her because her mother name is Devi. And I said, you can be also, you can be a Christian. At the same time, you can be in Hindu faith, you can be a Black, and you can be Indian American, and that's where the society is going to. Now it has really become the melting pot that we talked about for years and years.
I think that you're exactly right. And what people don't realize in academics in other countries, the civil rights movement is studied as a revolution, one of the few successful revolutions in the world, because it changed the nature of this society. And so, people always think, again, they usually focus on it's Black people, but it is not. It changed the nature of everything within the society and the rights that we all have throughout, that we enjoy in many different ways. I'm an immigrant too. I'm a Jamaican immigrant. And I always say, I have to thank African Americans for everything that I'm able to do and be in this society, because I wouldn't have been able to succeed in the way. I wouldn't have even been able to come here if it wasn't for all that they've done. And so we all have to be grateful for the sacrifices and they being the first in the line of fire for everything that we've been able to succeed with.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sterling, Ramesh. So former Secretary of State and First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton said that the future is now in her speech at the Democratic National Convention. How would you describe this moment in time in American history, as we are considering voting in first woman, first South Asian, first African American? Ramesh?
Well, I supported Bill Clinton when he ran for the presidency. Also, all the Democratic presidents. I was able to take him to India when he was a sitting president, also, and other organization we started together, American India Foundation, with Bill Clinton. We started that. I love Hillary Clinton because when Mother Teresa passed away, she asked me to escort her to Mother Teresa's funeral. And so I flew down on Jack Kennedy's Air Force One. Our problem is going to be, defense area. That's where our weakness is at the present time. And with what's going on with all the wars that are going around, that's what my suggestion is going to be to her, is how do you answer that question? That's where I don't think immigration is going to be a problem. Okay, it will be more of a problem will be with the defense area, because that's what Obama, when he ran, he picked Biden, who had a great resume on the defense area. And the other thing is on the debate part of it. She's a great prosecutor, but she will have to have also be a counterpuncher in this, and Trump is going to come after with everything. So she's got to learn to be counterpuncher.
I asked myself that question when Biden first endorsed her, and yes, yes, I think everything has been put in place for her. She is walking on the shoulders of giants who came before her. Of course, Hillary Clinton, Shirley Chisholm, We can't forget Jesse Jackson with the Rainbow Coalition. And of course, you know, we have Barack Obama. And of course, we have to give it up to Joe Biden for all that he's done in putting her forward. I think that it seems that we are fed up with the divisive politics, the negative politics, and we're ready for what this all means. And we know, we see this nation. This nation is moving, as I've already said, the kind of like this kind of multi-ethnic coalition. And when this multi-ethnic group, we've got all of these new people coming in, helping to build this country and change this country. And she's a figurehead for change. She's a figurehead for all the possibilities of everything that this nation says it wants to be. So let's see, you know, we can all move forward.
The United States is the top destination in the world for people moving from one country to another. Over 70 million immigrants have arrived in the United States since 1965. These immigrants trace their roots to virtually all countries around the world, as Dr. Sterling had pointed out. The largest numbers hail from Mexico with 10.6 million and India with 2.8 million. That's different from a century ago, when in 1920, the largest immigrant populations were from Germany and Italy. So Ramesh, how does the Indian American diaspora define themselves? We were talking about Indian American, South Asian. It's changing, Indian American, South Asian. So how an Indian diaspora's presence is being felt in both parties. So what are your thoughts?
Yes, absolutely. You know, see, we remember India is a democracy, okay? So it's easy for us to participate in a democracy, you know, than the Chinese would do it. My generation called us Indian Americans. And then the next generation, our next generation, they call it South Asian, okay? Where you know, Indian Americans is the biggest chunk of it. But you know, there's more to it. Is other than the numbers that are improving, of course, there's also that we have become opinion makers, also big opinion makers in terms of doctors numbers. 12% of all the physicians are Indian Americans. Okay, in terms of IT, okay, there's huge IT that is there.
Well, I agree with you about the synergy, and the two most educated groups in this country are South Asians and Black women. And so you see that South Asians tend to have more BAs, and African American women tend to have more master's degrees. And so there is, you know, there's something going on in terms of this idea of what education means and what the possibilities are in opening up our world and understanding what it means to position ourselves in not just, you know, this kind of realm of professionalism, but also in the realm of politics. And I think that we can all move together in kind of building this change that we want to build and create the change that we want to see. So I think the future is open. The future is ours. The future is something that we can actually create for ourselves.
What are the issues affecting those who identify as multiracial? So according again to Pew Research, the U.S. Census Bureau found that in 2013, about 9 million Americans chose 2 or more racial categories when asked about their race. The Census Bureau first started allowing people to choose more than one racial category to describe themselves in the 2000 census. Between 2000 and 2010, the number of white and Black biracial Americans more than doubled, while the population of adults with a white and Asian background increased by 87%. So what are the issues affecting those who identify as multiracial from your perspective, Ramesh?
in Virginia is what did a good job. Okay, Virginia. There is the Hindu American Coalition, who's working with the Muslims in Virginia. Okay, what happens is that the votes get divided, and there's nobody gets elected in the South Asian community, in the Muslims and the Hindu community. So we are working with them and saying that, look, okay, we're going to show you. We have five people, call them the Samosa caucus, okay, and more will be elected, one in Arizona and one in Virginia. We will show you how to get elected. Get your next generation to run for office. We will show you how to do it. So that coalition of Muslims and Hindus is starting over here, okay, more so, and hopefully it will also get it in India, because it has become polarized in India.
Well, just to begin with the whole idea of the multiracial population, one of the things that you have to understand is like the psychology of people. Most people want you to belong someplace. They want to clearly identify you as being something or someone. And when you have this multiracial identity, you're saying I'm more than one thing. I'm all of these different things. So people who are multiracial tend to feel like feel like an in-betweenness, a sense of really kind of not belonging. But I think that's changed, because this country, or the younger population, have embraced have embraced more heterogeneity. They've embraced unorthodoxy. They are open in so many ways that maybe my generation hasn't been open. Maybe your generation hasn't been open. So they're more welcoming of multiplicity on many different levels. So the kind of crises of not belonging doesn't quite fit anymore. And so people understand that they can make their own place. They can chart their course through almost anything. So it's a matter of, is there a course to chart? That is really the question. Is there really a course to chart? And I think that what we have been seeing in the past few years, especially post with the pandemic, was there really a course to chart? And now we're opening up courses. And so what will that course look like? We're really at the cusp of like this brave new world. Work doesn't look like the same as it used to. We're redefining all different types of ethos in how we're handling just everyday functioning, and how we want to approach the world and approach life. This is part of what I teach, is looking at the world in a very different way. One of the things I would bring to my students is the map of the world, but I'd show the map from outer space and the globe. And the globe from outer space, guess what? It's not the, Northern Europe and Northern America showing. It's actually the opposite way, from what we're used to seeing, because the globe from outer space, what pops up first? It's the Indian subcontinent and the African continent. That's what you see. And so you're seeing the world from outer space in a different way. And so this is what we have to understand, that from the youth itself, there's a new articulation of the world and the world dynamics. And we have to just be prepared for how they're thinking, how things are going to change, and how things are going to move. I can't really speak to the Hindu population. I don't know how they're thinking. I'm hopeful from what Ramesh has said in terms of the coalition building and across this like the multiple years of kind of being in this country and moving forward. And I think this is the story of all immigrants. You know, we've come here with hope. We're building, we're moving in the society, and we're looking for how we can keep moving forward, you know?
When we're living in an interdependent world, where global cooperation, will be desperately needed to solve for problems, problems on a global scale, like climate change, like how do we, develop an ethical framework around artificial intelligence? How do we, how do we become more competitive in terms of talent, recruitment, and retention, and that also connects back to our local communities and the work, Dr. Sterling, that you do in the classroom, and
And
preparing
that's exactly what we teach. That is exactly what we teach, because I don't teach the local, here, I teach the global. And my students, we connect to all the problems that are around and the solutions that are around, and how you speak to somebody on the other side of the globe. And we find commonalities and we find our divergences, but we find ways to speak across the board. And so this is our iteration. This is where we're going, no matter what.
Right. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to be with both of you.